This is definitely the most exciting horror movie in Indonesia. In 2025, the whole film is packed with intense moments, and absolutely gives the audience no chance to catch their breath. A headless female ghost who acts as a sleeping companion, a group of charred men encountered while using the toilet, an 80-year-old man who can run as fast as a cheetah. More terrifying ghosts are waiting for you to discover. In Java in 2003, it happened to be the season when sugarcane was ripe. In order to earn extra money, a group of young people got on a car heading to the countryside. As long as they work hard in the sugar factory, for more than 10 days, they will get a generous reward. This job is called a seasonal job. After the workers arrived at the destination, the person in charge assigned rooms to everyone, then everyone lined up and walked towards the dormitory. At night, several people in the girls' dormitory were about to have a midnight snack, when they suddenly heard a strange sound. Mary, who was wearing blue clothes, immediately walked to the window worriedly to check the situation. Her roommate said there was nothing serious, it was just the sleep alert that the person in charge had mentioned, and it should be okay if they didn't sleep. On the other side, John, a worker in the boys' dormitory, was ready to change his clothes and pray. Unexpectedly, there was a haunting right at the start. John really had such good luck. At the same time, Mary had already finished her midnight snack, and went to the kitchen to get some water to drink, but there were rustling sounds coming from above her head. Could it be that there were mice? Oh my god, there must be something unholy in the sugar factory. Thinking her roommate had gone out, Mary hurried out of the dormitory to look for her. As she walked, she arrived at the factory building. In a corner Mary didn't notice, a terrifying figure quietly appeared and slowly approached her, but Mary didn't see it, and continued wandering aimlessly around the sugar factory. When she heard the sound of musical instruments, she stepped on a box and climbed up to look through a hole in the wall. She saw that inside, a traditional Indonesian wayang kulit was actually being performed. Not only that, the room was actually filled with half-naked audience members. Puzzled, Mary turned to look around, trying to find someone to tell about the strange scene inside. But when she turned back again, all eyes were staring straight at her. Mary was so scared that she lost her balance and fell. Ignoring the pain, she ran desperately towards the dormitory, barely escaping the terrifying dark figure chasing her from behind. With so many strange phenomena, the sugar factory clearly hid an unknown secret. The next day, the person in charge gathered all the workers together, and emphasized the curfew rules again. After sunset, the sound of a wooden gong would be struck. At that time, everyone must stay alert. Those who didn't come back must hurry back to the dormitory, and the siren at 9 o'clock is a warning for everyone to go to bed immediately and mustn't leave the dormitory again. Others listened to these words with indifference, but Mary looked guilty, but no one seemed to notice anything wrong with her. At this point, the person in charge continued, saying that sugar production would officially start in 3 days. For now, everyone should follow the foreman to their respective posts to familiarize themselves with the work process. At the person in charge's order, the foreman quickly found their respective team members, but Mary was called to the office by the person in charge, who said she would be in charge of assisting him from now on. Soon, everyone divided the work and started working. Some cut sugarcane, some transported sugarcane, some kept records, and so on. At this time, Mary was helping the person in charge deliver documents. On the way, she heard the chirping of a bird, and followed the sound to find a baby bird, so she quickly put the baby bird back into its nest. Suddenly, someone said, "This is a good deed, and it will be rewarded." After saying that, the woman left. On the other side, a worker was working hard to cut sugarcane in the sugarcane field. Suddenly, he saw a cobra, and the worker held his breath in fear. Luckily, the cobra only scared him a little before leaving. Soon it was break time. Someone started talking about the sugar factory, saying that the place had caught fire once before. The others asked where he had heard that. A fellow worker stepped forward. At this time, other teams were also talking about the fire. They said the accident happened 7 years ago, when a fierce fire broke out in the sugar factory's warehouse. Many people were trapped inside and couldn't escape, and were eventually burned to ashes. They were all seasonal workers, and their cause of death was wandering around outside at night. Those workers had gone to the warehouse and gotten drunk, but the warehouse door was suddenly locked. After a loud bang, all the workers were engulfed by the flames, and even though they wanted to escape, they couldn't at all. Since then, the sugar factory had set up the alarm sound. It reminded everyone not to go out, to avoid meeting with the wandering ghosts of those workers. On the other side, Mary was busy in the office, but she always felt a cold chill on her back. She turned around anxiously, but saw nothing. Mary was so scared that she let out a scream, but in the blink of an eye, that evil thing disappeared. In a panic, she went out, only to see her roommate Ronnie ahead of her, so she caught up with her, and asked if she had gone out the night before. Ronnie didn't give a response. This series of events scared Mary a lot. She ran all the way and rushed into the crowd. Several of her roommates saw that she looked pale, and hurriedly took her back to the dormitory. At night, the security guard and workers were playing cards outside. The distinctive-looking Bob said, "It was such a blessing to work in the sugar factory, with food and accommodation provided, and a high salary too." But the security guard said that wasn't the case. No local people were willing to come here. That's why the sugar factory had to recruit workers from other places. The worker asked if it was because the place was haunted. The security guard said there was something even more terrifying than that. During the colonial era, this factory had everything it needed.
Rambut mas, ada. Pengemis mundur, ada.
The security guard said that in addition to these usual ones, the sugar factory had once had a mental asylum. Every late night, the ghost of a mental patient would wander out, chasing anyone it met with and refusing to let go. There's only one way to get rid of her: say excuse me, only then will she step aside and stop pestering. Just then, the security guard glanced at the time, realized it was almost 9 o'clock, and told the workers to hurry back to the dormitory to sleep. After listening to ghost stories all night, the workers were too scared to stay any longer, and rushed to the dormitory like crazy. Bob told him to learn to be as brave and calm as himself, but as soon as he finished speaking, the siren sounded, and Bob instantly sped up and ran faster than a rabbit. "This is really a bad friend," the fellow worker felt that. He seemed to have seen the burned ghost in a trance. He was afraid to look back and check, but luckily there was nothing. Just as he breathed a sigh of relief, the slipper he had lost on the way flew over. The fellow worker broke down and rushed into the dormitory. At the same time, several people in the girls' dormitory were preparing to have a midnight snack again. Seeing that Mary had been distracted all the time, her roommate stepped forward to ask about the situation. Mary came to her senses and said it was okay, and also reached out to set the plates. On the other side, Linda, a female worker, was using the toilet outside, but the light above her head suddenly started flickering strangely. She was so scared that she quickly flushed the toilet, and got ready to go back. Linda felt as if there were countless pairs of burning eyes around her, so she groped her way in the dark to leave. Unexpectedly, she collided head-on with her roommate who had come to wash up. Luckily, all the ghosts from just now had disappeared. After her roommate finished washing up and went back to the room, she knelt on the ground and prayed devoutly, and after that, she prepared to take off her prayer clothes. Who can stand this with their fragile heart? The next day, the roommate told others about the spooky cries for help she had heard. Everyone comforted her, saying it must have just been a nightmare. After that, everyone went to their respective work posts. Mary was going to deliver documents, and on the way, she met Ronnie, who also had documents to deliver. Ronnie said she could help since they were going the same way. Mary didn't refuse, and then prepared to go to another place, but after taking just a few steps, she saw a terrifying scene. The transport truck started moving on its own and rushed forward, heading straight for Ronnie. Mary panicked and shouted for her to run, but Ronnie wore a grim smile. She stood still, waiting for the oncoming transport truck. In the end, she was buried by the scattered sugarcane. Mary was so scared that she screamed wildly, and the workers rushed over quickly when they heard the sound. The person in charge scolded Mary. Why did she let someone else do her own work? Mary cried uncontrollably, saying that Ronnie had offered to help on her own initiative. She never expected an accident to happen. At this point, an elderly worker called the person in charge aside, and asked if the sugar production work would be delayed, but the person in charge said it was absolutely not allowed. She had already reported to her superiors that everything was normal, and the holidays were coming soon. It was the perfect time to sell sugar. Stopping work now would result in heavy losses. The elderly worker had to find the shaman. The shaman cut open several coconuts one after another, but inside them were either dirty blood or centipedes. The elderly worker knew that Ronnie's accident wasn't an ordinary mishap. There was some evil entity at work. so he asked the shaman what to do. The shaman said she would prepare a ritual ceremony in the afternoon. On the other side, Mary walked on the road, distracted. John asked her what exactly had happened with the accident. Mary said she was too scared. In fact, on her first night here, after the siren sounded, she had left the dormitory and followed someone to the factory building. She saw many people inside watching a wayang kulit performance. She suspected that Ronnie's accident was related to her going out at night. In the afternoon, the shaman and the elderly worker prepared many sacrificial offerings, hoping that the evil entity causing trouble would be satisfied and no longer come out to harm people in the future. At night, Mary went back to the dormitory and got into Ronnie's room, wanting to apologize to her, but she talked to herself for a long time, and Ronnie didn't give any response. She even kept her back to Mary the whole time. Mary was confused about what was going on, and inadvertently looked to the side. To her shock, she found that the Ronnie in the mirror was actually a terrifying evil ghost. Mary's heart rate spiked instantly. Her feet were as if welded to the ground, unable to move. She could only watch helplessly as the blood-covered Ronnie approached her. Hearing the scream, the other roommates hurriedly rushed in to check. After hearing Mary describe the whole story, the roommates comforted her, saying that Ronnie had already been sent home, and that she shouldn't overthink it. Shortly after, roommate Linda picked up the lunchbox. She asked Wadi from the kitchen if she wasn't supposed to take food to her fiancé, adding that if she didn't go soon, it would be past 9 o'clock. Wadi hurriedly fumbled around looking for her headscarf. Linda said she could help deliver it. Later, she went to the boys' dormitory area. The one who opened the door was Bob. He liked Linda the most. After opening the door, he quickly called a fellow worker over to him. He asked the worker to punch him so hard that his nose started bleeding. Bob exclaimed that it wasn't a dream after all. Linda had really brought him a love-filled bento box. As he spoke, he showed it off to the fellow worker. Just then, Wadi's fiancé came over to ask about the situation. Linda hurriedly handed the things to him, and she added that Wadi had spent a long time cooking it carefully. Bob immediately felt very disappointed, and asked how he could get such treatment himself. His fellow worker thought he was dirty from head to toe, and would need to take at least 800 baths. Everyone was still chatting happily. Another fellow worker leaned over and said it was almost 9 o'clock, telling Linda to hurry back to the dormitory. Linda listened and turned around to leave, but the siren went off before she reached her destination. Linda was so scared that she rushed frantically into the dormitory building. The next day, the shaman and the elderly worker got into the warehouse, and were shocked to find that the sacrificial offerings were still there. Obviously, the situation was more serious than they had imagined. The shaman furrowed her brows, and said they had to hold a ritual. Later, the two placed 2 ox heads on the ground, applied fresh blood to their faces, and began chanting incantations. At night, the security guards were patrolling the sugar factory. They talked about the incident, where the sacrificial offerings weren't accepted. One of them always felt a strong sense of unease in his heart, but the other told him not to be superstitious, and no sooner had he finished speaking than they heard an unusual sound. Following the sound to look, they saw someone fetching water in the middle of the night. At the same time, John, who always prayed before bed, put away his prayer clothes. While closing the wardrobe, he took a moment to admire his own good looks. After admiring himself enough, he got into bed to sleep, but didn't notice the terrifying presence behind him. In the middle of the night, John was still having a sweet dream. Suddenly, a few drops of liquid dropped onto his face. He struggled to open his eyes, only to see a headless woman standing right in front of him. The next day, John rushed out of the dormitory, still replaying the nightmare from the previous night in his mind. Suddenly, a group of people ran past him. They all gathered by the well to check the situation, and discuss stopping the sugar production work. After they left, John curiously walked to the well and looked down, only to find a dead person inside. He was about to scream when he was stopped. The elderly worker asked him to keep it quiet. He also asked if it was John's first time working as a seasonal worker, or if he knew something else. John fell silent. Obviously, he was hiding something. The elderly worker told him not to hold back. Soon, Mary was called to the presence of the shaman and the person in charge. After examining her hands, the shaman asked what she had seen that night. Mary looked worriedly at John, who was standing beside her. John told her she just needed to tell the truth. Mary anxiously told her experience from the first night. When the shaman heard that Mary had left the dormitory chasing someone who looked like Ronnie, the shaman then asked if Mary had gone to the West Warehouse, and Mary replied that she hadn't. The shaman sighed and said that someone else must have gone to the West Warehouse, because it was said that John had a special ability. He had been having prophetic dreams. In his dream, he saw two people going to the West Warehouse.
Ada pelanggaran yang lebih besar lagi, yang kita belum tahu.
After that, Mary and the others arrived at the entrance of the West Warehouse. The shaman said this was the place where the big fire happened 7 years ago. But if they wanted to find out what exactly happened, they could only invite a ghost to possess someone. At night, the shaman put on her equipment and swung her whip. Then she wrapped it around the elderly worker's neck. She acted very fiercely, and soon the elderly worker fell into a coma. Unexpectedly, after 2.5 seconds, the elderly worker suddenly opened his scarlet eyes. He shouted that humans and ghosts had signed a contract to live in peace. Whoever violates it will die. As he spoke, the elderly worker started dancing and ran barefoot to the shards of glass, pacing back and forth on them. He even picked up the glass shards and ate them. The shaman swung her whip hard. The elderly worker looked up in terror. This speed is almost catching up with a cheetah. What kind of thing is it that's possessing the elderly worker? After that, the elderly worker rushed into the West Warehouse. The others hurried to chase after him, and found the elderly worker kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. The shaman used her powers again to drive the ghost away. The elderly worker successfully regained his sanity. Mary and the others asked what was going on. The shaman said that during the colonial period, accidents often happened here, so humans reached an agreement with the ghost leader Maharatu. The West Warehouse became a sacred place for ghosts. Both sides wouldn't disturb each other and live in peace, but a group of seasonal workers angered them, and eventually suffered retribution by being burned to death in a fire. After that, the shaman locked the warehouse and even specially set up a barrier, but this time, someone actually damaged the barrier and even stole Maharatu's things. The security guard asked what they were. The elderly worker said they were some gold jewelry that shouldn't have been there in the first place, but now the gold has been taken by greedy people, which is why the ghosts have launched a crazy revenge. The situation is very bad. As they were talking, the person in charge suddenly started bleeding from all 7 orifices, and spat out a mouthful of old blood. The shaman hurried forward to save him, then told the security guard to send him back to rest. The shaman said they must find the people in John's dream, and make them return the gold quickly, otherwise, everyone will be doomed. On the other side, Linda was preparing to go back to her room, when she heard a strange sound. She hurried into the room to check the situation, but she actually saw gold jewelry scattered all over the floor, so Linda quickly packed them into a bag, and prepared to run away. But when she turned around, she found the door was gone. She shouted for help. The charred workers cornered Linda against the wall. In the nick of time, Waddy's fiancé Tom rushed in, wanting to know what had happened. Linda complained that it was all her fault, for not being able to resist taking the gold jewelry. Tom saw the jewelry and questioned why it was still with her. As he spoke, he was going to return it, but as soon as he went out, he was stopped by the ghosts again. Linda had already begun to doubt her life, but soon Tom regained his composure, pulled her along, and continued running towards the West Warehouse. Shortly after they left, Mary and John arrived. Other fellow workers heard the commotion and also gathered around, wondering what had happened. Mary and John told them the whole story. Upon hearing that her fiancé had stolen something, Waddy exclaimed that it was impossible. John said that whether it was him or not, it would be 9 o'clock soon. They all had to find him, and then everyone split up to search. Suddenly, a fellow worker came to John for help in a panic, saying that his friend was acting strangely. John heard the voice and ran to check on the situation. The fellow worker hiding in the wardrobe trembled, and said that the fellow workers outside weren't human. This thing must be Maharatu. It grabbed John by the neck. The fellow worker who saw this terrifying scene took off running, but he had just run out of the dormitory when he was pulled back by a force. At this point, John felt like he was going to die, so he quickly recited scriptures and prayed to Allah for protection. Unexpectedly, this method actually worked. At the same time, Bob was still searching for Linda and Tom, but he heard someone riding a bicycle behind him, and the person quickly approached them. Upon Closer inspection, there was actually a terrifying hole, exposing flesh and blood on this person's face. Bob and his companion were so scared that they fled in panic, but there was more than one ghost. The two held back the urge to urinate and continued to flee, but no matter how they ran, the woman in the mental patient uniform would block their way. The fellow worker told Bob. He remembered the security guard saying that they had to politely say "excuse me" to pass, so the two tried saying it in different languages, but the woman still stayed where she was, and even wet her pants in fear. Bob and his companion had run so much that they began to doubt their lives, but the female ghost still kept chasing them relentlessly. On the other side, Waddy kept saying that her fiancé couldn't have stolen anything, but no sooner had she finished speaking than she stopped in her tracks and told Mary that she felt creepy because someone was staring at her. When Mary saw it was the ghost again, she hurriedly told Waddy not to look back. Then she pulled Waddy along and kept moving forward. At this time, Bob and his companion were still fleeing for their lives when they accidentally ran into John. John asked if they had found Linda. The fellow workers said they didn't have time to look. They had just been chased by the ghost that wet her pants. John sighed and said, "Then let's go to the West Warehouse together." At the same time, Linda and Tom were also preparing to head to the West Warehouse, but the siren suddenly went off, and the security guard stopped them. Tom said they wanted to return something, so the security guard let them pass immediately. After Linda and Tom walked away, the security guard sighed that the shaman was really powerful. There was no need to look for the thieves at all. The thieves would return the things on their own. Linda put the gold jewelry back into the box, but the shaman said the items weren't enough. Mary, who had rushed over in a hurry, stepped forward and said she had found a gold bracelet at the dormitory entrance. Now all the items had been returned to their rightful place, but Waddy lost her composure and questioned Tom why he had stolen the things. The shaman also urged the two thieves to confess everything honestly, because the gold treasure chest didn't exist normally, but if someone committed a crime in the West Warehouse, it would appear. If they didn't explain clearly, this matter wouldn't be over. Scared, Linda quickly confessed. She said that she and Tom had actually been having an affair for a long time. On the first day they came to the sugar factory, they made an appointment to go to the West Warehouse at night for an intimate encounter. 2.5 minutes later, Linda was shocked to find that the nearby statue was glowing, so she hurried over to check, opened the box containing the gold jewelry, and greedily took some back with her. Now that the truth was known, Waddy was almost driven crazy. She couldn't understand why her fiancé and her good friend had betrayed her. Moreover, because of the two of them, the innocent Ronnie and the person in charge were seriously injured, and someone even drowned in the well. Unable to accept the reality, she ran out. She didn't run far before collapsing powerlessly onto the ground. The next second, Waddy actually levitated in place. Waddy's soul-piercing laughter echoed throughout the factory. Everyone realized something was wrong and hurried to rush outside, but they were stunned when they stepped out. All the workers had lost their sanity. They crawled on all fours in a twisted, menacing manner, approaching the scarlet hot glass shards and scrambling to gnaw on them. John hurried to stop everyone. The shaman fought against the possessed Waddy, knocked her to the ground, and planned to perform a purification ritual, but Waddy suddenly opened her eyes and grabbed the shaman by the neck. The scene was already in complete chaos. Unexpectedly, at this point, Mary's eyes suddenly turned vacant. Then she walked to the wall and sat down, waving one hand continuously in the air, just like the Wyonkulit performer she had seen on the first night. Mary was transported to several years ago, where a human leader said someone had made a mistake, and only a sacrifice of human blood could appease the situation. Later, a group of people carried a sedan chair to the edge of a deep pit. Without hesitation, they threw a pair of sacrifices into the pit in the sugarcane field, and frantically shoveled soil onto it. Then Mary fell into a coma, and the others returned to normal as well. When Mary woke up, she told everyone what she had seen. The shaman believed that Linda and Tom must be sacrificed. They were the chosen offerings. Linda and Tom were so scared that they kept begging for mercy, but they were the ones who had caused the disaster, so they should be the ones to end it. Late at night, the shaman performed a ritual dance on the burning glass shards. Maharata successfully possessed her. The elderly worker told her to look at the sacrifice. The possessed shaman immediately picked up a dagger and cruelly slit the sacrifice's carotid artery. Of course, a single horse was far from enough. At this point, everyone had already carried the sedan chair over but Linda and Tom weren't. Inside, it turned out that even though they were deeply sinful, the shaman still couldn't bear to let them die, so she took blood from their palms, and applied it to sandbag effigies. She also wrote their names on the effigies, fearing detection by Maharatu. She specially drew a salt circle to enclose Linda and Tom. She warned them to stay inside compliantly until the ritual was over. Soon, everyone buried the sandbag effigies in the soil. They thought everything was finally going to end, but something happened to Linda. An evil wind blew, and the salt circle scattered in an instant. The door also slammed shut heavily. No matter how hard everyone banged on it, it was useless. They finally found something to use to break down the door, but the door opened by itself. But Linda and Tom were no longer inside. In their place were two human-shaped sandbag effigies. If the effigies were here, then Linda and Tom were most likely in the soil. Terrified, everyone hurried to the sugarcane field to dig. The shaman looked confused, not knowing what was happening, when suddenly she spat out a large mouthful of blood. Finally, Linda and Tom paid with their lives for their actions, just as the shaman had told Linda before. Good deeds bring good rewards, but evil deeds naturally bring evil retribution. The seasonal workers got on the bus back to the village. Everyone was resting, except Mary, who looked at John with a worried expression. John sensed something and opened his eyes. The film ends here. Indonesian horror films really are the way to go. Whatever budget they have is all spent on creating intense scenes. It's all about not giving the audience any chance to catch their breath. It's really dedicated in its production. Moreover, surprisingly, the plot isn't too cliché. I couldn't even guess the ending at a glance. This aspect is really well done, but the first half of the plot is a bit slow, which makes the climax appear too late. The pacing is clearly not well controlled. Despite these minor flaws, this film is definitely the best Indonesian horror film of this year, in my opinion. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.